Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Undefeated, top 11 ranked BYU heading on the road to play a UCF team that has really been struggling the last couple of weeks. 3-4 have lost their last four straight. They're 1-3 in conference play. Now, the caveat with this football game is you look at this UCF team and say they are still a very dangerous football team, and we saw as much Saturday night against Iowa State. I mean, they were winning that football game late in the fourth quarter against an undefeated top 10 ranked Iowa State team. This UCF team is talented. They just haven't been able to figure out how to win football games. And that's kind of the stark opposite of what we've seen from BYU, where, BYU didn't necessarily play their best football against Oklahoma State. I would argue that was the worst performance we've seen BYU have in 2024. Still figured out how to win that football game against Oklahoma State. This BYU team has been an absolute blast. And I'll just put my hand up real quick and say the BYU fans who've been rocking with the boys for the last 12 months, y'all know I completely missed on this team. I didn't think there was a ton of optimism for this BYU team heading into 2024. They have proven me wrong in a massive, massive manner. Jake Retzlaff, we're going to talk about him. This kid is just he's must-watch TV at this point. I think he's one of the more talented quarterbacks in this Big 12 conference, fired up to get into it. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys. The amount of support for these preview prediction episodes, it's been amazing. To the BYU fans, it's been a blast talking this team, and y'all have shown a ton of support. So appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, let's get into this one. Let's start with what we saw from BYU Friday night against Oklahoma State. And I want to start with quarterback Jake Retzlaff. And I think what's so exciting for BYU fans is this is a young quarterback still. And I think a lot of people forget that. I mean, kind of took over late in 2023. You can still tell that he's maturing and developing as a quarterback, but this kid is super talented. And I feel like when people talk about Jake Retzlaff, it's what he can do on the ground, which he is a phenomenal athlete and makes this BYU team very hard to deal with on the offensive side of the football. But what he can do as a passer doesn't get nearly enough credit. I mean, he can make some big time throws. And what you're seeing with Jake Retzlaff is that continued development of, hey, I know I can make some big time throws. I want to be a difference maker, a game changer for BYU at the quarterback position. But walking that fine line between making those big time throws, being a difference maker, but also keeping the ball out of harm's way, it's often tough for young, inexperienced quarterbacks. You're seeing him continue to get better at that. I mean, against Oklahoma State, he had some throws that kind of made you scratch your head if you're a BYU fan. And then the second half, I mean, he's making some big time throws and changing the game for BYU as he continues to develop that aspect of his game where we all know he can make the big time throws. We've seen it all over the film the first 7 games, but limit the amount of mistakes he's making. That makes this BYU team just that much more dangerous. And I think the second storyline for BYU is, kind of that development of the run game. I think it was struggled for BYU early because they dealt with some injuries at running back. Now you get LJ Martin back. He finally looked kind of fully healthy in that football game. LJ Martin's a difference maker. And we kind of knew that heading in. That's how BYU wanted to run the football. The emergence of LJ Martin running the football, I think, is massive for BYU for a couple of different reasons. One, it gives them that balance, but I think more importantly, might take a little bit of that pressure off of Jake Retzlaff. And if you can take a little bit of pressure off of Jake Retzlaff and not have him try to do too much at times, that's probably the best version that you're going to get of this quarterback. If you're a BYU fan, like, you can tell this team and this quarterback is continuing to get better as the season goes along. That's really exciting. And you look at this UCF defense, and I think the most frustrating, and I think UCF fans would probably agree with this, you watch them on the film, you look at the numbers and say, what does this UCF team want to be on defense? Because they don't create a ton of negative plays, but they also give up a lot of explosive plays. When you're not creating negative plays and also giving up explosive plays, it's not a good combination, right? And so you look at UCF, do you want to be an aggressive defense that is creating turnovers and creating negative plays, or do you want to be a defense that might be a little bit more conservative but not allow the explosive play? They haven't really been able to find that identity. And I think that's led to a lot of struggles for this UCF team on the defensive side of the football. I think they have some difference makers, but they haven't really seen those difference makers fully emerge for that defense. Now you flip the sides here and say this BYU defense, uncharacteristically not great against Oklahoma State. A couple of things I want to note. One, some bad run fits on Ollie Gordon. These linebackers have played really good football for BYU. Probably weren't great against Oklahoma State. They gave up 2 runs of over 50 yards, I believe, in that football game. Oklahoma State was 9 of 13 on third downs, 2 of 2 on fourth downs. Weren't great on the money downs. Again, I think that's uncharacteristic of a very good BYU defense. Now, I think the intriguing matchup here is this BYU secondary continues to be, I think, the best secondary in the Big 12, but quite frankly, one of the better secondaries in the country. You look at the numbers: 5.2 yards per pass. That's number 5 in the country. 52% completion percentage. That's number 7 in the country. They're forcing 2.5 turnovers per game. That's number 2 in the country. Talk about why BYU's been winning these football games. They've been crushing in the turnover margin, and I think they got in some hot water because they didn't crush in the turnover margin against Oklahoma State. This BYU team turns the football over, and they got a very, very good secondary that can get their hands on a lot of passes. This is kind of the intriguing matchup where, look, I don't think UCF's going to try to throw the football in this secondary. You look at UCF, it's quite a one-dimensional offense. They make the change to quarterback Ja'Curry Brown, who I think is a talented quarterback, but not a very polished and developed passer. He was 8 of 20 for 62 yards and 2 interceptions against Iowa State. You're looking at this matchup and say it's hard to see UCF trying to test this BYU secondary down the field. Now, the flip side of that is this is one of the best rushing attacks that we see in the country, not only with the quarterback position with Ja'Curry Brown, who is a phenomenal athlete, but also RJ Harvey, one of the best backs, not only in the Big 12, but in the country. This UCF team runs the football as much as any program in the country. They ran the football for 354 yards against an Iowa State defense that I think is pretty dang good. If you're BYU, I think the game plan is relatively simple. You're loading that box, you're walking your safeties into the box, you're trying to take away that run game and just daring UCF to push the ball down the field. And if they do push the ball down the field, one, UCF hasn't really shown the willingness to do so. They haven't shown the ability to do so. I think most importantly, if they do want to push the ball down the field, they're throwing to a secondary that knows how to get their hands on the football. So I would be very surprised if Gus Malzahn wants to throw the football much. If you're BYU, you want to just make sure you're watching Kobe Hudson. He is a very talented wide receiver for UCF, and quite frankly, the numbers for him would be much better on an offense that wanted to throw the football more. If you can take away Kobe Hudson and you can take away this UCF run game, it's going to be hard for UCF to consistently move the football on BYU. And I think that, I mean, I'm a Michigan fan, so we're pretty one-dimensional on offense as well. When you're as one-dimensional as UCF, even if you're that good at running the football, it's hard to consistently move it when you don't really have that threat of pushing the ball to that deeper third. And I think for BYU, we're going to dare you to throw the football down the field on this really, really good secondary, and we're going to try to take away the run game. And if UCF can push the ball down the field and make some throws down the field, you kind of give them a golf clap and say this game might be a really competitive football game. But you want to make them do that because they haven't really shown the ability or willingness to do that consistently. Getting into the pick here, BYU a 1-point favorite on the road. And I get this is a tough travel day. This is a tough place to play in the bounce house. At the end of the day, you got to go with BYU. They've looked like the better team. You kind of got to trust your eyeballs, but you also just have to trust a team that has shown that they're playing winning football versus a UCF team that, I think UCF fans would agree, hasn't necessarily been playing winning football to start the season. I'm going to go BYU to cover the point. This team, it feels kind of like the team of destiny. Like, this is a team that I did not think would be that good in 2024. They are a very good football team that has a quarterback that I think is a legitimate difference maker for this BYU team. We'll close it out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.